socially. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Daniel Kish.
Not just yet. Yeah, we'll start. No, it's fine. Okay. So, what is it like to be a bat? I was actually asked that. Someone wrote to me, and they were having this discussion in a psychology course, philosophy course, and he introduced me to the whole Thomas Nagel thing and asked if I could shed any light on what it might be like to be a bat. And I asked him, what would it be like to be a hawk? And so as a human echolocator, I don't know that I have any more of an idea what it's like to be a bat than a sighted individual necessarily knows what it's like to be a hawk. I know that bats have extremely adept, extremely refined echolocation capacity. An echolocation capacity that humans are not likely to equal, at least not without substantial technological assist or even surgical assist. I've also been contacted by people who asked if it might be possible to surgically, or actually to suggest that it might be possible to surgically alter one's ears to improve one's spatial auditory acuity. And I would want more evidence base before someone went and surgically altered my ears, but I think it's an interesting prospect. I think what I'll do is go through some demonstrations of what the echolocation process might be like. I can give you all some first-hand experience, a first-hand example of what the echolocation process is like, so that you walk away with a sense of it. But I think that what I will do is start with the video, if we could. And it's on Cynthia's computer. So she's going to go ahead and play a video that not only gives you a little bit of an introduction to the echolocation process, but also gives you a little bit of introduction to our work in particular.
It seems we have no sound.
Oh, do we still have no sound?
He's coming up here.
Okay.
Sound on the laptop?
What I'll also do a little bit later on in the talk, someone asked me last night, and I get asked this on a fairly regular basis, what is it like to perceive your environment as a blind person? In particular, what is it like to be able to gather information from your surroundings, to gather spatial information from your surroundings as a blind person? And likewise, I like to put that back into the hands of the people who ask. What is it like to see? What is it like to gather information visually? How easy is it to answer that question? I do, however, have an answer to the question of what it is like to gather information as a blind person. Okay, so this, let me give you a bit of an introduction. So, start this from the beginning. So basically, this is one of our colleagues. He is now an instructor. I began working with him when he was 12 years old. And he, obviously he echolocates, as you'll see. And he we, World Access for the Blind, were asked by Guinness World Records in Italy if we could set a record. And I asked them, what kind of record? What did you have in mind exactly? And we went back and forth, and I decided to send Juan to them because I didn't really want to do it. And you'll see what kind of record Juan sets. But in addition to Juan setting this record, Juan also works with families to help them, to help their children develop these kinds of skills. He worked with families in Italy while he was there. He's recently worked with families in Honduras. And he and I will be traveling to Austria to work with families and schools for the blind there. So we'll go ahead and play that. We'll go ahead and play that video, and I'll fill you in on the rest afterward.
Juan Ruiz. Eccomi. Sono qua, Juan. Welcome. Welcome.
Gracias. Thank you.
Che cos'è l'echolocation? Come funziona?
Sound waves bouncing off objects.
Praticamente con questi segnali che io emetto riesco a capire dove sono gli oggetti.
Listen.
Ascoltate.
This obstacle course here that I'm going to do today
Questi ostacoli che cercherò di superare oggi
is not just poles.
non sono semplicemente dei pali,
It is a goal.
è uno scopo.
And the bigger the goal,
E se lo scopo è molto grande,
the bigger the more obstacles you'll face.
più ostacoli dovrai affrontare.
And on the other side of that goal
Dall'altra parte, nonostante gli ostacoli,
is victory.
c'è la vittoria.
And if you should fail the first time,
E se c'è un fallimento all'inizio,
you should get up and try again.
ti devi rialzare e ci devi riprovare.
Juan, are you ready? Yes. Okay, start at my go. 3, 2, 1, go.
È partito?
Parte il tempo.
Sentite? Il pubblico sta in silenzio per poter permettere al giovane messicano, ormai residente negli Stati Uniti, di poter quasi come un sonar localizzare i pali. Avete visto? Adesso non sapeva dove fosse questo, ma lo ha localizzato. Perfetto. Signori, probabilmente sarebbe difficile anche vedendoci una cosa del genere. State vedendo un ragazzo non vedente che sta superando un Guinness World Record.
Stop.
E allora! È stato bellissimo vederlo, Juan. Vieni con me, andiamo al centro, my friend. Mio amico.
Doveva percorrere questo percorso in meno di 53 secondi e lo ha terminato in 48,34 secondi ed è un Guinness World Record!
Voglio metterlo io. Scusami, Marco.
Do you okay, if you can get that one to work, that's fine. So, I taught him how to do that. Actually, I should be clear. I taught him how to echolocate. I did not teach him how to do that, okay? And in fact, that was only his second time doing that particular kind of task. And of course, the obstacle course was not the same. You saw them changing it on stage even before he reached it. So he never actually had a chance to practice that particular obstacle course. But he did have a chance to practice that particular task only once before. Okay? So the idea here is that the echolocation process, like the visual process, is transferable. It's generalizable. One can apply it to other kinds of skills, to other kinds of perceptions. The style of training that blind people tend to receive traditionally focuses on the learning of particular kinds of skills.
Excuse me, Daniel, it's not playing sound in any format.
Right, okay. That's okay. We tend to teach blind people how to exercise certain skills under certain circumstances and certain activities. The approach that we take is to back off of skills training, what I call mechanics training, and focus on perception training, the development of perceptual abilities that one can apply to learning any kind of skill that one can feasibly do using the kind of perception that we're talking about. So the question we might ask is, how could one do that? How could he do that particular kind of skill using just a tongue click? We're talking about a person who has no usable vision, doing this kind of a task on a live stage in front of a live audience in an environment and under circumstances which are in many ways less than optimal. Okay? And I'll answer that question actually with a demonstration. Instead of using pylons, I'm going to use this laptop here. This is not an advertisement for Apple, although I think I should be collecting royalties by now. This is just a prop, okay? It might as well be a serving tray. In fact, a serving tray would actually work better, but this will do the trick. So let's pretend that this is one of those pylons, one of those poles that Juan had to navigate around and betwixt. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a continuous sound, a sound, and watch what happens as the prop passes in front of the sound. You might actually close your eyes to hear this more effectively. Okay, could you hear a difference? Okay, so you can hear the sound changing as the prop comes in front of my face and then goes away. And in fact, if you listen carefully, the whole prop doesn't actually have to pass. You can hear it approaching just at an edge. Okay, so I only have to be about an inch into the process, into the prop for you to be able to hear the difference. Okay, and so what we have here is an individual, say a blind person who's using echolocation. He passes a column or a pillar or a pylon. He hears the edge, and then hears the pylon pass by. It's basically, it's an acoustical version of a flow field. It's an acoustical flow field. Just as you have an optic flow field, you have an acoustic flow field. So you flow past objects in your environment. Okay? You're also edge detecting. So not only can an individual tell whether something is in front of them or beside them and where the edge of it is, an individual can use this edge detection capacity to actually trace the contours of an object. Okay? So it could be a parked vehicle, it could be a bush, it could be a tree, it could be just about anything with reasonably defined contours. And an individual can use this edge detection capacity to trace those contours and to interact with objects in a precise manner. okay? So as Juan was navigating his BMX bicycle through this obstacle course, he was identifying the location of these pylons, okay, with a degree of precision that was necessary for him to both find the gaps between them and to actually avoid knocking them over, okay? Now, but there's an additional quality that needs to be present here. He needs to know not only where the edges, the boundaries of these pylons are, he also needs distance information. He needs the ranging process, which is endemic to echolocation. Okay, echolocation is actually very, very good at ranging. Sonar sounds for sound navigation ranging, right? So here now, if you close your eyes for a moment, I'll do a different demonstration, which will be a distance task. So I'm going to make the same kind of sound. I'll make that sound continuously without changing the nature of the sound or the timbre of the sound itself. But you will hear the sound change as I move this computer toward my face and away from my face. So I'll start with it at arm's length, and I'll shh for a bit, and then you'll hear a change in the sound. Okay, could you all hear that? Let's make sure. So we'll do a little quiz, okay? So what I'd like you to do is close your eyes, and I'd like you to just listen for a moment. I'm going to shh very relaxedly for a while, and then at some point I'm going to start to move this computer. And I'd like you to indicate by saying now or something else. You can say anything you like as long as it's polite. When the computer starts to move. And we are going to just relax into this. I've had people scream now or stop before I even began shushing, okay? So we'll just ease into this. Thank you. All right. I didn't have to bang myself in the head with this computer. Excellent. Okay. One more time. One more time. Eyes closed. Good. All right. So, nicely done. So if you open your eyes, we've moved from here to about here, less than a foot. Okay? Now, experience tells me that even if I had this microphone off, with a panel this size or a bit larger, most of you, in at least the forward half of the room, would still be able to hear this. Okay? So if you think about this, without any training at all, without any formal experience, without any conscious awareness of your own echolocation capacities, you were able to hear a displacement of a surface of less than 12 inches, with the surface being, well, this size, okay, not particularly large, 15 by, I don't know, 8 inches or something, 13 by 8 inches. The process isn't that difficult, surprisingly. We have taught hundreds and hundreds of blind people all over the world to be able to do this to varying degrees. We've even taught a few sighted people. A lot of variation among sighted people in terms of capacity. But I think that this process, this ability, is hardwired. I think it's an ability that we have. I don't think it's an ability that we have to make happen. I think it's an ability that is dormant, ready, and waiting to happen. It just needs to be activated. So Juan, doing his little stunt for Guinness posterity, basically was using a combination between distance and edge detection information to be able to accomplish that task in a similar manner than you guys have done here today, with one exception. With Juan, he's not only hearing the differences. He's not just saying to himself, okay, this sounds like this, therefore I need to maneuver my bicycle this way, and that sounds like that, therefore I need to maneuver my bicycle that way. The sound, the acoustical calculations that are happening are actually mostly unconscious, probably. What is conscious in his mind, though, are the actual images, an actual image representation of the obstacles that he's navigating. It isn't just a sound signature. It's a kind of image experience, okay? So when a person who's echolocating is imaging, they are essentially constructing an image out of three characteristics that they may or may not be conscious of. When we train students, we train them to be conscious of these characteristics. But these characteristics eventually become more and more unconscious. You're looking at location. Where is the item or feature or object relative to me and relative to other items or features or other objects? Okay, where is it? Where is it laterally? Where is it vertically? Where is it distally? Is it in front of me? Is it behind me? And how far? Dimension, having to do with the geometry of the object. It's edge geometry, if you will. How tall is the object? How broad is the object? Is it broader than I am? Is it narrower than I am? If it's narrower than I am, is it a lot narrower or just a little narrower? A lot wider or just a little wider? What are its contours? Where are its edges? There's one exercise that we do, which if you Google around enough, you'll find this video, where we have students trace the outline of a car. So you look at the car, you click at the car, you determine which is the front end and which is the rear end. Okay, how would a person who's echolocating know which the front end of the car might be versus the rear end? Anyone want to answer?
Real headlights.
Headlights. What else?
Windshield.
What about the windshield?
Echolocating the windshield, the slope of the windshield.
The slope of the windshield, okay, okay. Getting closer, what else? What's that? The mirrors, okay.
The hood is lower.
The hood is lower, all right. It's kind of all of the above and more. The slope of the windshield is likely to be more gradual in front than in back. The hood is likely to be lower in front than the back. It's also likely to be longer, okay? Rear view mirrors, more difficult to detect. This is actually where cognition comes into play. I was in the UK, and I was traveling with someone. She was another mobility specialist. And we were traveling along the sidewalk, and we passed a few minivans or something. And she made the remark that a friend of hers, who was blind, said the bane of his existence are these rear view mirrors that stick out of sports utility vehicles or vans. They're about head level, or possibly shoulder level, depending on your height. And you whack into them every time. Your cane doesn't detect them, right? And she said, there's no way for a blind person to detect these. And I said, well, actually there is. Even if an individual who is echolocating had difficulty detecting those, and there's reason for that. There's reason why those things are difficult to echolocate casually. Because with echolocation, you have a bit of difficulty with figure ground, meaning that differentiating one object from another if they're close together, okay? But it is easy, simple, to echolocate the fact that there is a minivan there. That's not hard. You can do that casually. You can do that while in the middle of a conversation with your loved one, maybe, probably. For some people, easier than others. The point is that by casual observation, you can tell that you're passing something the size of a minivan, okay? And if you know that that's what it is, then you can direct your attention to where the rearview mirrors may be and avoid them that way. Okay, anyway, so back to the car. Once you've identified the front of the car, you take your hand and you hover an inch or two above the car and you trace its outline. You go up the bonnet, the hood, over the windshield, across the top, and down the other side. And everyone goes, ooh, ah, because you've been able to do this, okay? That's an example of edge detection, of how the contours of objects may be perceived and interacted with. And the final is depth of structure, or for a long time I called it density, because every time I say depth of structure, people always ask, what do you mean? And then I say, well, we're talking about density, we're talking about the depth of structure of surfaces throughout the object. So is it dense? Is it solid? Is it highly reflective? Or is it sparse? Like a bush would be sparse. A stone or a boulder would be solid. A fence would be sparse, but a wall would be solid. Okay? Or is it absorbent? Okay? A person wearing clothes, for example, would be much more absorbent than a person not wearing clothes. So basically, those are the three main characteristics. Texture as well. To some degree, you can get surface texture. Okay, how smooth a surface is versus how rough a surface is. Using natural echolocation, the surface would have to be relatively rough for it to really register as being rough relative to a smooth surface like glass. And that's basically it. There is no color. There is no sense of color. There is no concept of color. For individuals who have seen before, there may be an imagination of color, but it will not correspond to characteristics of the actual object. Most of you will have a hard time imagining a completely colorless image. There is no grayscale. There is no black. There is no white. There is no color. Imagine seeing out of your elbow. What would you see? I don't know. You wouldn't see anything. You wouldn't see color. Okay? That's basically all I have to say about that. I can take a couple of questions and then we'll move to the next person.
Okay, we can take a couple of questions now, and then we'll have a bunch of time for discussion at the end. Okay, I see somebody back. See someone there and someone there.
It was a wonderful discussion. How important is it for the person to generate the sound internally? That is the analogy to touching something with your hand as opposed to the cane versus producing the sound from another instrument as opposed to your own voice.
Okay. I think the key here is self-control over the process. Obviously, touching something with one's cane, you're getting conductive information, whereas touching something with your hand, you're getting actual sensory information. So there's a difference there. But I do have control over the cane, and as it comes into contact with things, the edge of the stage, for example, and this nice little piece of foliage here, I know what those are based on conductive information. I would know a lot more about them if I actually touched them, with my hand or my foot if I were barefoot. In terms of using an instrument or a device relative, as opposed to a tongue click, I think that one could imagine creating a device that issued sound waves, signals, if you will, that were more, that could possibly solicit more information. It is important to note, however, that when one is in control of the production of one's own signal, the brain is ideally primed to receive information from that signal. You cannot fool your brain. You cannot do anything without your brain knowing about it first, okay? So if you're producing the signal, your brain's already ready. Also, if you're producing your own signal, your brain is highly attuned to the signal that you're producing. So many people will make the argument, well, why not just use passive echolocation? Why not just use sounds that are incident to the environment? And you can indeed do that. There are plenty of sounds incident to the environment that one can use for echolocation. We call that passive echolocation because the individual isn't actively producing their own signal and is not actively responding to the signal that they produce, is not necessarily tailoring their signal to the requirements and parameters of the situation that they're in. So in producing one's own signal, one is much more active in the process of gathering information from the environment and interacting with that information.
Okay, and next one there, and then we got one just in front.
I noticed that you used a shing sound, more like a white noise, which you also show using a clicking sound. Do you vary the type of sound? Do you get different information depending on the type of sound you're producing?
The sh sound is generally done only for demonstration. So the clicking sound is the sound that would primarily be used. The timbre typically remains very much the same. It's the intensity, the amplitude that changes. So there are a variety of reasons that a human, now bats work a little bit differently, but a human will alter the rate of clicking and the amplitude of clicking depending on the activity and the situation. I have known self-taught echolocators who also altered the timbre, and that's fine, that works for them. I might say that that's actually quite an advanced use. It's easier, however, if you're using a signal that your brain has already highly tuned to, because the brain can much more easily filter that signal, extract that signal from noise. Echolocation is a trick. It's a trick of constantly extracting the echo from noise. It's a signal-to-noise trick. Okay, so the more familiar you are and the more attuned you are with the signal you're using, the easier that filtration becomes.
Okay, last one for now from Kevin.
Do you find that in order to learn this skill, it's better to really think about the aspects of your auditory signal that you're getting and to understand each individual aspect? Or is it better for the process to become automatic, not to really think about it? And, for example, are children better at learning this than adults because they just do it without thinking about the actual cues that they're using?
We try to make the process conscious before making it unconscious. So you want a conscious competence before you reach an unconscious competence. We do work on sound signatures in the sense of, I don't usually concentrate on the sound feedback itself. I usually concentrate on the environment in terms of the objects themselves. So instead of talking about what it sounds like, I tend to talk about, or I tend to get the students to talk about what the object is like. Is it tall? Is it short? Is it wide? Is it narrow? How do we know? Now, when we ask how we know, then we may talk about the sound, okay? We do try to help students develop a language around their experience, because although sighted people have a very rich language around visual experience, blind people tend not to have such a language because that language isn't accessed within the culture. It isn't valued within the culture. Okay, so I've had students come to me and say, well, sometimes I think I can hear walls, but my mom says that's stupid. Well, how likely is an individual then going to share with others their experience with their environment? And indeed, how likely is such a person going to feel supported in developing such skills? So we do try to develop language, and we try to develop that through discussion, but it tends to be more in terms of one's experience with items and objects in question, and not necessarily so much in terms of the technicalities of the sound signatures themselves.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.